Hello, everyone. It's my great honor to be here today with Allan Moorlock. I had the great fortune of meeting Allan in person more than 10 years ago when we were both in training to become first waking down teachers, well, waking down mentors, and then waking down teachers, and now we're Trillium teachers. And it has been my joy to connect with Allan periodically over these last 10 years and again today. I'd like to share a little bit about who Allan is for those of you that don't know him. He let me know that before the age of 4, he took 2 vows. The first one was to never forget his pre-birth nature as ever free spirit. And his second vow was to find his way home. In 1968, a fierce determination to find knowledge took hold of his life. This force carried him through many teachings and inner openings until 1992. That fall, the individuality dissolved, and what remained was formless presence, immense love, and the knowledge he had sought. The personal identity soon returned, and the next 12 years marked a period of investigation and stabilization. Sometime after 2002, Allan experienced a strong calling into embodiment. Fortunately, he found his way into the company of those who had gone before him in the heroic journey we call the second birth. Welcome, Allan.
Thank you. Yeah. In terms of my, is it okay if I mention my book?
Absolutely, please do.
Yeah, so I have a, I guess it best be called a spiritual memoir called Nothing Other. Let's see, pretty good, decent screenshot there.
Yeah, lovely. Thank
Nothing
you.
Other. It's available on Amazon. And just 1 hour ago, I received my, what do you call it when you get your first copy of a book? Proof.
Press proof?
Proof of
Oh,
the Spanish translation.
oh, beautiful.
So I'm excited about that. Not that I can read a word of it.
Oh.
But I'm happy to get it out. For one reason, I don't have to talk about it anymore.
Okay.
All the things that happened in my life, kind of given that away.
Wow.
So feels really exciting and blessed to be in this conversation with you, CL, and to explore to see what we come up with, what we discover, that hopefully some people will derive some degree of inspiration. I kind of break down spiritual expression or spiritual teaching in 3 broad categories. One is inspiration, which is just like an energetic feeding for the spirit. The second is knowledge. And the third is process. I'm fond of process myself. Some people call it technique, but to me it's not technique, it's just a process, kind of like an engineering formula that we learn to plug into. So what else? Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here?
Our topic is consciousness. I think first of all, let me say something, just kind of a precursor to everything else. How many teachers do we have in the teacher circle now? About 40?
Yeah, a little more than 40. I think we might be 43, 44 right now.
More than 40. And CL was mentioning something earlier about how different and how unique each one is. And I think of the group, of the collective, I tend to be a little more esoteric than some, probably than most. And so CL and I share a love of that. And I look over the years, my own sort of map has developed out of all the explorations. And I feel like when I talked about that vow when I was a child, of vowing to find my way home, I was teaching a silent retreat. I was this designated speaker at a silent retreat a couple of years ago with about 80 some people. And I talked about this story in which my master had appeared in a dream, and someone was making a map. And I said, oh, I can help with that. I know that territory. Mm-hmm. Now, the territory in the dream was an area where I do my business work, which is a landscape business. But I mentioned that story during the retreat, and at this particular retreat, I was giving expression to my map of the process of finding their way home. And someone came up afterward and said, yeah, Allan, you really are a map maker. So I think that was kind of the cosmic setup for, not that I understood it until more recently, that I kind of volunteered to put myself into the bowels of the human experience, knowing that I would be determined to find my way back, my way into a resilient state of well-being in terms of my own divine being. And so it sort of, because I had sufficient memory of my original nature, my a priori condition, however elevated that was, or even if that means anything. But it gave me an ability to recognize transitions that I went through. So I remember things like, I remember the first time a thought came into mind, and there was this kind of shock to my being that, what the hell is that? How did that get in here? It wasn't a thought about the thought. It was just this energetic reaction to the intrusion of a thought. And then I remember the first time a concept formed in the mind. And it was a little strange, but it was also exciting. And I saw the possibility that within concept, there was a possibility of going beyond the kind of common thought. And so part of the drawback of that was I always had a bit of aversion to like the consensus thinking. Mm-hmm. All my life I've had that. I didn't know what it was, but looking back, I can see how it caused me to be in some ways dysfunctional. And there's probably some people who can relate with that. So one of the things that is kind of a broad stroke that I've, let's say, clarified is, looks like this. The body is an extension of the mind. The mind is an extension of consciousness. Consciousness is an extension of what I would call the Godhead. Mm-hmm. Now, if you don't like the word God, I completely understand that, and forgive me because I love the word God. It doesn't mean, to me, a male-dominant figurehead. It means the source and totality of everything that can exist, the ultimate source, the pure source energy. And I could figure out other terms like Great Field. There's a book called Great Field, which is a wonderful book. But rather than break that down, I'm just going to use the word God. And hopefully no one's too offended by it, knowing that I don't mean what you may have added onto that word in your past. Here it is, the great mystery, the great unknowable mystery. So derived from the Godhead, one of the derivations of the Godhead then would be what we call consciousness. Now, some people who have recognized consciousness and realized or awakened to consciousness consider that to be God. It's not quite, doesn't quite work for me. That's why I'm breaking this down a little differently. So then condensing from consciousness comes what we call mind. And I don't just mean the conscious thinking mind, that's a part of the mind, but the mind is bigger than the conscious thinking mind. You have the superconscious mind, the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind. For example, if you're sleeping, and for me, I could be sleeping, the slightest noise, I'm awake. Mm-hmm. We used to have a cat. The cat walking on the carpet would wake me up. And when I was a teenager, when my mother would come down the hall to wake me up, as soon as she left the kitchen to come to wake me up, and I had 3 other siblings, and she would wake us up separately. But when she left the kitchen to come to wake me up, I immediately woke up. By the time she got to my door, I was usually out of bed. So there is a part of the mind that's, let me say it this way, that what we consider the mind, or the conscious thinking mind, is a small part of a much bigger mind, which is a subset of what we refer to as consciousness. And then from mind, then stepping down from mind, or condensing mind, comes what we call body or form. That's a little more nuanced than that. And I don't want to go into that too much more in detail here. Just to sort of locate on my cosmic cosmology or map what we mean by consciousness when we talk about consciousness. Because other people may talk about it based on a different map. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I like to be as kind of precise as possible. So even the words, each word has its own vibration, and the more we can hone in on the vibration of the word and the significance of the vibration, I think the more profound their communication can become. So now let's go a little more deeper into this relationship of form to mind to consciousness. So you try to get a little more clarity about it. If you look at a building, let's say the house you live in, or a commercial building, you see a particular building. Now, contained sort of prior to that building, or more subtle than that building, you would find a design, a blueprint. Now you could have one blueprint, and you could have 1,000 different buildings based on that blueprint. As soon as you build a house, for example, from the blueprint, some of the corners are not going to be 90 degrees. Some of the walls are not going to be absolutely plumb. And there's going to be little nuances that'll differ from building to building, even if you build 10,000 houses out of one blueprint. So the more deeply we go into form, the more variation there is. But there, the blueprint can be the same. Now, where does the blueprint come from? The blueprint comes from the knowledge, the accumulation of knowledge of an engineer or architect. So then you've got the intelligence, which designs the blueprint from which you derive the form. But then the question a little deeper, where does that intelligence, where does that knowledge of the designer come from? It comes from the capacity to have knowledge, or the capacity to recognize patterns, which we will call intelligence. Then one step further is, where does intelligence come from? What was prior to intelligence must be consciousness. Mm-hmm. If the architect, if the guy, the engineer, is not conscious, he could not have acquired the knowledge. He wouldn't have had the intelligence to acquire the knowledge to create the design to build a building like that. So we start to get an idea that consciousness is something that's sort of prior, before, behind, but included with. Because we just kind of tease apart what we mean by intelligence and consciousness. So you could have someone who's conscious, they're wide awake, they're conscious. You can have some kind of communication with them, but somehow they're not able to express or to become or to be what we call intelligent. It's not that they're less than or something's wrong with them, it's just the ability to express, I kind of boil intelligence down as the ability, capacity to recognize patterns, discernment of patterns. We could call that intelligence. I'm just saying my definitions, mm-hmm. how I think of it. So then we start to get a sense that prior to or underlying all intelligence, all form, is this intelligence, and that even deeper than that is consciousness. So you could think of then, when I said before that mind is an expression or an extension of consciousness, you could say that consciousness begins to condense.
Mm-hmm.
It begins to localize as a form of intelligence. And then, so then intelligence, you could say, is somewhat congealed consciousness. Then from there, you can see that intelligence starts to coagulate or congeal more firmly in terms of concept or specific understanding. 10 people start kindergarten together. By the time they get through PhD, their field of interest, their particular thought structures are vastly different. One's an engineer, one's a doctor, one is a farmer. I don't know. Very, very different. But the underlying factor would be this, what we're referencing as consciousness. And we're going to do, let me check on the time here.
We're doing fine with time, Allan.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any questions about that, CL? Anything that needs to be clarified?
I personally don't have any questions for you because what you're saying really matches my experience in life.
Oh, beautiful.
And I wouldn't have, just like you said, okay, all those kindergartners start together learning their A, B, and C. I might not have given the same expression to the same general underlying field as you are, and yet as you speak it, I completely understand it. And also, just by the way, I actually love the word God. I mean, I know it's been maligned and personified into someone who's judgmental and a he and stuff like that. But like you, it's like, it's just a simple word that can speak about what is even greater than consciousness.
Oh, beautiful.
And so to me, it's a lovely word to just, it's so simple. And I was so glad to hear you use it, actually.
Okay.
And also, I also respect that it could be a challenging word for some people based on their upbringing. So I want to, just like you, to acknowledge that for some it might be challenging, but for those of us that just recognize that even consciousness might not be the end.
Thank you. I have a great friend, a very dear guy. He doesn't like any conversation about God because he was so abused by the Catholic priest, and his father was just brutalized by these guys. No, I don't want to bring that into the conversation you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So I totally respect and honor people who don't like the word. So forgive us, those of you who are listening. If anyone who doesn't like the word, we're not talking about that God. That's a man-made version of God, which has its own place, I suppose. So, something that came to me as I was sort of energetically preparing for this is, let's look at what's the significance then of all this talk and teasing apart and understanding consciousness. And there are many scientists who still are adamant that consciousness is something that's generated by the brain, which I am not in alignment with that in any way whatsoever. Consciousness is localized, consciousness is sort of captured by the brain the way a radio captures a frequency. The radio doesn't generate that music and all that. The radio, if you tune it properly, it simply catches a certain frequency. So the brain catches a spectrum of consciousness, a capacity of consciousness, like a radio does with a radio signal. Maybe that's just my opinion, but I certainly I hold that opinion pretty strongly. If it's only an opinion, then I'm okay with that. So what came to me as a way to, let me see if I can get in. I'm really excited about this, as you can probably tell. So what's the purpose of the whole thing? The purpose of the whole thing, let me just say it succinctly if I can. The purpose, I would say, is to derive a sustainable, long-term, evolutionary platform of well-being. Sustainable, long-term, and evolutionary platform of well-being. Now, let me go into that a little more deeply. We historically, if we go back, I think relatively short-term in human history, we'll see that the human being derived its well-being from the small collective. My tribe, my well-being was largely derived from my place in my tribe. When I first started going to India around 1990, I would meet like village people. And as they would question me through a translator, obviously, their questions were asking about my group. They weren't asking about me. Like if I meet someone, I want to know, where do you live? What kind of tribe would want? I'd like to know what kind of trees you have on your property. That's one of my peculiarities. But I just wouldn't be drawn to asking people what tribe you belong to. But I think this is a valuable part of the conversation. So at one time we derived our sense of security or sense of well-being by being embedded in our tribe. And I am, by the way, part Native American, and I've had a lot of some mystical experiences with the Native consciousness. Mm-hmm. So I'm speaking somewhat from experience. Now, where we've come to, then from there, we kind of leaped into, I'd say within the last, 150 years maybe, mm-hmm. a kind of great experiment in individuation, mm-hmm. where now most people are very, very individuated, and the individuality has kind of become our deeply embedded with our sense of self. And we're kind of on our own to derive a sense of well-being based on our individuality, which the pain of it is that it brought us into a deep sense of isolation and separation. And I'm going to add a little bit of esoteric here, because that's what I love to do. The sources and my feeling about things is the human experiment, as I think of it, has come to this precipice a number of times to where that individuation became so extreme, because with the extreme individuation also comes interspecies conflict, because we're trying to derive a sense of well-being, a sense of safety based on a passing phase. And I think when you hear the term mass extinction, that's the basis of the past mass extinction to the human race. So we went back to ground zero and started again. And I believe that we've reached this point of we have succeeded in avoiding the apocalypse, the Great World War III. We have avoided that. We passed that marker in 2012. Now what we're doing, as I see it, is we're establishing this new domain of well-being that'll be based on something that's sustainable long-term. And it will also include a new layer, a new reality of a collective being that was not available in a previous era historically for the human. So I don't want to go too much more into that, but it's a topic that I really love. So anyhow, the analogy that I came up with, it just came in my meditation this morning, is an avocado tree. I don't know why an avocado tree, but that's what came. You know, don't you love the shape of the avocado? It's kind of like it's almost like the lingam in India, the Shiva lingam, which represents the arising of form out of nothingness, out of emptiness. So the avocado tree historically has derived its sense of well-being from its habitat, from its culture. Mm-hmm. The tree comes up in a certain climate, certain conditions. Seed generates and produces an avocado tree, and that avocado produces more seeds and so on for probably thousands, if not millions of years. Now, avocados get shipped to New Jersey, and nobody that I know of has successfully grown an avocado tree in New Jersey. It's just too cold, and the conditions are not appropriate for an avocado tree. Now, if somebody builds a greenhouse and structures it just right, they might produce a few avocados. So in a way, that avocado fruit arrives in New Jersey and it comes into this feeling of not being safe. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel safe. And this is kind of a crude analogy, but this is what came to my mind, so I'm sharing it. See, that seed then feels separate from its culture, separate from its, it doesn't have available that from which it has derived its sense of well-being. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the analogy is pointing at the human who's come into a state of separation, state of isolation. And I've heard that up to 75%, maybe this is just the United States, or maybe it's a larger sector of what we call Western civilization. Up to 75% of the people are using some form of substance, an external substance, to help them cope with depression, the malaise of separation, not just depression, other parts of it. 75%, that includes alcohol, various legal drugs, pharmaceuticals, as well as non-legal substances. And you could throw in alcohol, tobacco, and just this whole assortment of things that people use to soothe their lack of a sense of well-being, the emptiness of the lack of that, trying to derive some sense of safety. So I think what we propose here is to invite people into a field, a study, an investigation, an involvement. It's not just a study. It's not just thinking about it, but there are layers of this involvement with the purpose of deriving a deep and abiding, sustainable, permanent, evolutionary sense of well-being. So that's what we're after here. It's not just what is consciousness, not just answering that question in some sort of abstract philosophical sense. We're after something much more deeper than that and much more profound. I believe, and I think that most of my, shall we say, peers in the investigation would agree with at least this part, that that's really what we're after. And everyone's going to have different language about that, obviously. But that's what we're kind of trying to tease out for as many people as possible, and that's how we will derive this evolutionary shift into the new world, the new human being.
Beautiful. I love hearing this.
Yeah. So we're looking, how do we, shall we say, generate an environment, a platform for the avocado tree to feel safe enough to regenerate itself, to continue its evolutionary journey. Each of us being the avocado seed that's been taken out of its culture, out of its natural environment, its native environment. And
yeah,
I think
Allan, go on.
I think that that's a big part of what we're doing, is kind of developing this new platform for the collective to move forward, doing our little part in that. So you were going to say the time.
Yeah, I'm just recalling that vow that you had, even as a 4-year-old, of knowing that you needed to go home.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's that avocado that's been brought to New Jersey, and go, this isn't home. And that sense that home is a place of safety and belonging.
Yeah. It's really important. It's really important to all of our work, I think.
Beautiful. Wow.
How's the time now? I don't have a
okay. Yeah, probably if you did have an exercise to lead, this would be a good time to start that.
This would be a good time to start that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Well, thank you so far for your words of wisdom.
I really enjoy this very much. It's what excites me.
Wow. So
let me pre-warn everybody. This is a process that has just arrived, so to speak. It's just sort of come out of the cooker of my intention to share love and wisdom and the joy and the adventure of exploring spiritual development. So it's the first time I've gone through it with another person. It's a bit of an experiment, but I'm really excited about it. I'm really happy with how it's come about.
Oh, good.
And it taps into some old Buddhist thought streams, which I'm totally novice with the Buddhist teachings, although I have some sense of the deeper meanings of some of the teachings. So let's see, and there may be some, I may have some interaction with CL during this, but it's going to be on, I think, let's see, do we want to do eyes closed, eyes open, eyes closed? We'll start with eyes closed.
Okay.
And the way I usually start in eyes closed is we just take a little deeper, a little faster breath in. Very slowly breathe out. As you breathe out, relax. Another breath in, a little deeper, a little faster. Slowly breathe out, very slowly, and relax. Third time, breath in a little deeper, a little faster. Very, very slowly breathe out and totally relax. Just be aware of your body, contact of your body on the chair. Be aware of your environment. Just register that for these few moments you're safe, all is well. And as we go through this, I'm going to ask some questions. Don't try to answer the questions, just answer the questions. Let your first impulse, just go with your first thought. Trust that first thought. You can't get it wrong. It's not about right or wrong, it's just an exploration. Just notice any thoughts that come into the mind. And ask the question of those thoughts. Are these thoughts giving me or attempting to give me a sense of well-being?
Would you like me to answer?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Let's go a little, let's tease a little deeper.
Okay.
Just notice if there's any inclination in you energetically to derive a sense of well-being from thought. Now let me just see, let me look in myself. Do I derive any of my well-being, any sense of well-being from my thoughts? On a scale of 1 to 10, 3. I'm at about 3. And you, CL, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you notice? 10 being the most.
4.
4, good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just be honest. It's about being honest, totally honest with yourself. It's not about referencing some script of another spiritual teacher or an ideal or something that's in a book. Okay. Now let's explore feeling and emotion. The whole range, the whole spectrum of emotion and feeling. Just notice any emotions and feelings that are there. I'm still feeling a bit of nervousness, kind of, am I doing it right? Just noticing it, not trying to change it. Especially ambient emotions, you may never, so ambient and so constant, you may never have noticed them before. Let them become obvious. And ask the question, to what extent am I deriving my well-being from my emotion and feelings? And right now I'm at about 4, maybe a little more than 4, between 4 and 5. What do you get, CL?
I was getting 6.
6, okay, good. So it could be that some people kind of derive their sense of well-being 100%. On a scale of 1 to 10 of 10. And you can start to get a sense of the, shall we say, the fallibility of that. Because thoughts, emotions, and feelings are always changing. They're subject to so many variations. So for this moment in time, however briefly, it doesn't matter, split second or a few seconds, just retract yourself energetically from thought. Just with your intention, rely on your intention, trust your intention. At it for one moment, one split second, I will retract my sense of well-being from thought completely. And see if you can touch that. If you can't touch well-being, then touch your mere existence. See that you still exist, even in absence of thought. Now let's move to emotion and feeling. And for one moment, one brief moment, one split second, see if you can touch part of yourself that does not depend on emotion and feeling for a sense of well-being. If there's no thought, no emotion, no feeling, what remains? On a scale of 1 to 10, be at 0. With your intention, recognize that you can be in a state of perfect well-being without any thought, without any emotion, without any feeling. And I'm not saying this is an ultimate state to live in. But it's a recognition, very important recognition. Now, you would have noticed by now that you can remain conscious without any thought, without any feeling, without any emotion. You're still conscious. Is that clear for you, Sia?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm still conscious. Thoughts and feelings and emotions come and go, but I remain conscious. Let's take one more incremental step and just look to see, am I being conscious or am I being consciousness itself? See if there's any distinction there. Just notice what's the distinction between being conscious and being consciousness. Okay. I think for now we'll close this. We could go a little bit deeper, but I think I'm just saying that so we know from my perspective, I think from the conversation CL's perspective, there's a potential to step even beyond consciousness. Mm. But for now, let's just register, invoke, and intend that I can derive my well-being from this most fundamental reality of being conscious or being consciousness itself. When you're ready, we'll open the eyes. For those who are listening in, take your time, be gentle.
Thank you, Allan.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it. How was that for you, and any comments or?
Yeah, I'd love to share a little bit, and will have to speak in metaphor because I cannot speak directly of this experience, even though it was a direct experience. But so it was so interesting that I could find myself simultaneously able to listen to your questions and find answers to them, while at the same time my sense of self, maybe I'll say, was becoming more and more identified with something that was much bigger than the part that was listening. Yeah. But the unique thing that happened for me was when you suggested that I also, even if only for a split second, withdraw my attention from the field of the mind and the field of the emotions. And earlier you'd asked me, something of sense of well-being, like on a scale of 1 to 10, where I could find myself. And so the thinking part of my mind, also on a scale to 1 to 10, wanted to see how I was finding a sense of a wellness or ease, or, again, your words escape me at the moment, in that when I pulled my awareness away from physical sensations, emotions, and thinking mind. And when I did that, this is where I'd have to speak in metaphor. It was as if, because before I had a linear scale of 1 to 10, it was as if that linear marking point turned into a circle. Wow. And I could not identify the difference between the 10 and the 0. And then, because it's like, I don't know, that's all turned into 1. 1 0 or 1 10, there was no difference between the two poles. And then what happened, because of that, again, that metaphor of a circle or a sphere was so apparent to me, it was as if that sphere that we might call consciousness, because you asked to differentiate between conscious and consciousness. Yeah. Consciousness became this sphere in which all was contained. And yet there was still conscious awareness of the consciousness which all was contained. So it was really a beautiful
That would have been the next step, by the way. I wasn't quite.
Oh, okay.
I didn't quite feel like to go there, but that would have been the next step, to go to that field of awareness in which even consciousness becomes initially it can fall away completely. And then developmentally it becomes an apparent subset.
And like I say, I speak in my experience in terms of the way my mind wanted to understand it at any way. It created this metaphor of a line becoming a circle becoming a sphere containing all. And that's, again, this metaphor may not work for other people, but, it
works for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I thank you. Thank you so much for.
Yeah. There's a little bit more.
Okay.
Something I want to just kind of back up a little bit, as though go back to the beginning and kind of re-examine the whole conversation, but from a different viewpoint, using different analogies. So for a long time in my teaching, I'd been saying, we don't experience reality directly. We experience an interpretation of reality. And that's, I think, a really important, and I think that's a crucial threshold in the spiritual journey, is to really get that we don't experience reality directly. We don't even we don't know for sure whether we experience reality or not. What we know is that we have an experience, we have something's happening, and we derive an interpretation. Information comes in through the eyes in the way of electromagnetic signals, the ears, and so on. And that data gets plugged into this big computer. It's the most amazing computer. Man hasn't come anywhere close to inventing a computer that's this complex and this nuanced. So that computer that we call the brain, and something bigger than the brain, runs an algorithm at super high speed, and we interpret an experience. Now here's a book. I love this book, Bolado. Can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Deviant by Bolado. He's on YouTube, and he's not particularly what we call a spiritual person, although he obviously is in my eyes. But I was so fascinated with this guy. I bought his book, and I rarely buy a hard copy book. I get them on Kindle, and I never finish them. True confessions here. So here's what Bolado says, which I was so excited to read this. It completely confirms what I'm seeing. And I'm not reading this in sequence from the book. I'm just going to read a really short piece. He says, perception derives not just from our five senses, but from our brain's seemingly infinitely sophisticated network that makes sense of all of the incoming information. Now here is the crux of something so vital. He says, and he's like kind of looking, what percentage of the information we call perception comes through the eyes, comes through the senses? What would you guess? Just your first
80%.
thought. You're saying 80%?
Yeah.
In fact, in terms of the sheer number of neural connections, just 10% of the information our brains use to see comes from our eyes. Wow. 10% comes from the eyes. The brain generates 90% of what we see.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Wow.
No, you think of, okay, how does the brain derive and catalog that 90%, the database for that 90%, everything we've experienced and interpreted up to date. And a lot of that is from our culture, from our parents, from our teachers, from our geography. You can start to see how nuanced it is, and why each person is so unique and so different and so special. Although it doesn't always, being special doesn't always feel special, but unique. And it's just such a beautiful thing. And then going back to what I was talking about before, then you can start to see that everything. So there's a basis for this thought. It's not a thought that I use a lot. A big part of my teaching. You can start to see how this thought that's kind of presented by a lot of teachers, that everything is consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So from my standpoint, everything is constructed of consciousness, but not just consciousness. I would say everything's constructed of consciousness plus energy.
Okay.
So we could say, if you look at the Indian teaching, for example, which I'm somewhat steeped in, it means Shiva Shakti, energy and awareness, energy and consciousness is what constructs everything. So you start to see that a tree, for example, I have a chest over here, a cabinet for drawers. It's a wooden cabinet. So there's an energy that was in the wood, a stabilized energy, and then someone designed a cabinet, constructed the cabinet. And so it's an artifact of consciousness and energy. It's the result of consciousness and energy being constructed. So everything then is made of this consciousness plus energy. It's one thing, but we kind of break it down into these two primary components, which I don't think can be completely separated, although if we go too far into one direction, onto one side of that equation, let's say we go too far onto the side of the equation, it's just consciousness, and we go into this kind of nirvikalpa samadhi, or state of absolute empty consciousness. We go too far on the other side, which is only the energy, then we kind of go into that state of deep ignorance, the deep ignorance of being rather robotic in our life and expression, and just believing what we're told to believe, and not having any curiosity about an evolutionary expansion of our understanding and our development. But somewhere there's that balance of living in an energetic world and consciousness, which I believe we're doing our part and our way of teasing that out in Trillium Awakening, with this balanced approach of working to develop consciousness, working to develop mutuality, or the experiment of how humans can be together in a more optimal way. That's just off the cuff.
Lovely, thank you.
Off the cuff definition of mutuality, which is much more complicated than that. But then the embodiment part, which includes, integrating everything within our body. And let's see, is there anything else we need to talk about?
Well, I think there are many other things we could talk about, but probably in terms of this consciousness exploration, I think this feels complete for now.
I think so.
Beautiful. I want to let the people know that are listening to this is that one way you can find Allan is to go to trilliumawakening.org. All the teachers are listed there, and Allan has a page there with some essays he's written in poetry. And then what I'm going to do at the end of this video, I'll ask Allan to provide to me, I think you have a website as well, a personal website, and the name of your book and that. I can then put that on the end of this particular video so people can learn more about you by doing more of their own studies in that way.
Thank you, Seal.
Thank you.
Send my love and blessings to whoever's listening, and encourage you in your life. Hopefully we've given a little inspiration, and it's a great adventure. To me, it's the only real adventure, and that's of this life, is developing ourselves, because developing ourselves means developing the collective.
Yeah, I agree.
There's no separation from, no real separation, no sustainable separation of anyone from the collective.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that, even to that most cosmic level.
Yeah. But yeah, we could go on for a few more hours. But
We could. So, well, thank you so much, Allan, for joining me today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.